Welcome, guys. We're really excited to have this presentation. Chris and I are going to talk to you about creative finance. Has anybody done a creative finance deal? Have you wholesaled it? Okay, you guys are? Great. So we're going to talk about this hidden opportunity in the marketplace right now with creative financing. And just real quickly, I want to touch on this idea around when we market for motivated sellers and those leads come in and you get on the phone or you go on an appointment, typically you find all levels of motivation, from the very high motivation, which is going to be your low cash offer, all the way up to retail. Anybody get a lead and you talk to them and they want the highest price the market will pay, and they're basically just a retail lead. So, and then anywhere in between. So what we found, and what I believe is a truly efficient wholesale business, is it really doesn't matter what level they are on the motivation scale, we have a solution for them. And this is just a comparison between motivation and price. And basically the idea is the higher the motivation, the lower the price. So as motivation goes down, price goes up. Makes sense, right? Makes sense, right? So if someone's has very low motivation, they want a very high price. And so we try to service every single spectrum of motivation with a solution. So we're doing a lot of innovations, we do a lot of creative, and we even list properties as our last ditch effort. So I believe in having a real estate license. If they want retail, great, we'll list it for you for 3%. So any which way, we want to have a solution for the seller. You spend all the money on the marketing, you're in there, you're at the kitchen table or you're on the phone. Why would you not maximize every lead you have? And this is the way you do that. So if you're just doing the low cash to assignment method, you are capturing a fraction of the leads that you spend money on. Everybody with me on that? Does that make sense? Okay, so we're going to focus on just creative in this presentation. And creative deals are hot in the market. And why is that? Why are creative deals so hot? Why do buyers want them? Low interest rates, that's it, low interest rates. Yep, because low interest rates mean what too? If you're an end buyer, if you're a buy and hold, if you do cash flow, it means higher cash flow. And what does it also mean? It means if they go do a DSCR loan, what are they paying to do that? Well, they're paying high down payment, 25 to 30% down typically. What's their interest rate? 7, 8, right? And if you can bring them a 4%, 3%, 2.5% rate, are they very excited about that deal? So it's an opportunity that has a somewhat of a window. I mean, creative will always work, but right now it's a huge opportunity because of low interest rates over the past couple years. Now, the biggest thing you can take away from creative is that it's all about the terms, not the price. And this is a hard concept for a lot of wholesalers to grasp because traditional wholesaling, we're so heavily driven on price. It's all about how low I can get it. The lower I get it, the bigger the fee I make. And that all goes out the window with creative. And we're actually going to show you deals where the total acquisition for the deal is over the current value of that property, and we still wholesale it for $25,000. In fact, that's this deal right here. We're going to use this as a case study. This was a deal that Chris wholesaled recently for a $25,000 assignment. The total entry for the buyer to get into this deal was $434,000. The value was $390,000. So think about that. We wholesaled a deal for over value and made $25,000. Now that goes against everything you've ever been taught about wholesaling, isn't it? But why? Why did Chris make $25,000 wholesaling this deal?
Terms.
Because the terms were attractive. Okay, so the buyer could care less about the price, he wanted the terms. And you'll see that as we go through this. We're actually going to use this as a case study in a minute. So Chris, maybe explain briefly the different exits with creative. Like who's the buyer you're targeting?
Yeah, so for our particular market, we do have the benefit that we have a large presence with all of those advertised. We got long-term hold, buy and hold guys. We've got a really strong Airbnb market, and rap guys love my market.
This is a rapper.
Yeah,
he does raps.
Because there's so many VA loans, so lots of low equity where they can go in and package it up and resell it at 8%.
So there's investors out there that like these raps. They do that as a strategy. Okay, so that's why we target certain properties make a good wrap. Yeah, so if it's a subject to loan, then you're taking over a subject to loan at, let's say, 2.5%, and then you're reselling that property to an end buyer at 8%. And you make the spread now on the difference. So you buy it low and you're selling it at a higher rate, and your cash flow is the difference in the two interest rates.
Yeah.
But what you're doing is rather than have two loans, you merge them all together. That's why they call it a wrap. You're wrapping one big loan with your end buyer. So a market that has a lot of buyers that can't qualify for a loan, I mean, every market has that, but if you can identify buyers that don't qualify for a loan, but they have down payment money and they make cash flow, meaning they have good jobs and work, they're really good buyers. So wrap investors will buy these things and they'll resell them to that type of a buyer. So if you can identify that, like for example, no balloon and a low interest rate is going to be very attractive to a wrap investor. Why? Because he's going to repackage it for higher and he's got no balloon. What's a balloon mean? It means the total loan is due after whenever the balloon is. So if it's a 5-year balloon, that loan's due to get paid off or refinanced in 5 years. So no balloon means that wrap investor can hold on to that loan forever. Okay, so that's one way to identify that. We're going to talk about what we look for in creative. So when we look at creative, there's lots of creative finance strategies. I think there's probably dozens of different techniques. But it really comes down to these three, which is subject to, and what's subject to? Taking over an existing loan. Seller finance, and so that would be there's a loan already in place on the property. Seller finance is when?
When the homeowner is the bank. It's free.
So it's free and clear. So you create a new loan. This one you take over an existing loan. This one you create a new loan. And then what's a hybrid?
When there's plenty of equity.
It's when you're taking over a loan and then there's equity, so you create a second position loan for some or all of the equity. And we find that about 50% of our deals are subject to, maybe that's even higher.
Yeah, I mean, a large portion of why we do so many sub-2 deals is our market has a massive military presence, meaning there's a lot of guys who've bought in recently who used VA loans, who put 0 down, and now they get new orders. They need to go ship off to wherever, and they're faced with a situation where they can't afford to bring cash to the table after you account for 6% in agent fees. And a lot of them have no desire to be landlords. So there's a huge opportunity there because of that.
So FHA and VA are great because they got in with such low down that now to resell, the market dips a little bit, they go to resell, they can't pay closing fees and commissions without writing a check. So then what you'll see is you'll see properties listed for sale and they drop the price until they can't go any lower, and then what happens? It sits. No one's buying it. We come along, create a finance structure and wholesale it for $25,000 when the entire market ignored it up until then. How cool is that? Okay, so the one thing about creative, and this is where a lot of people get tripped up, is it's not just one thing or even two things, it's 10 things. So when you look at traditional wholesale, we look at like, okay, low cash, and that's all that matters. And that's the only thing we're trying to get to is what's our low cash number, and we're going to compare that off of an ARV or an as-is value, and that's it. With creative, there's actually 10 different things that are going to factor into whether or not you have a deal. And what's tricky about this is if you think about a scoring system, if you score really well in some areas, you can offset where you don't score so well in some other areas. And we're going to actually do a case study where you'll see that actually in real life, where Chris wholesaled this deal for $25,000. And we had maybe like 6 or 7 really awesome features out of the 10 and a couple that weren't so great, but combined, it was attractive enough for a buyer to want it. And buyers want these creative deals for multiple reasons, and different things are important to different buyers. For example, for some buyers, the entry fee, which is your total cash into the deal, might be the biggest factor that they determine when buying. So if they can stay under 10% or 15% or whatever, then that's the biggest thing for them that they look at. Other buyers, they don't care so much about the entry fee, they care more about the interest rate, or if there's a balloon, or other things. This deal that we're going to use as a case study, they were very heavily interested in the tax benefit because they had a tax liability and they bought it at the end of December, and they cared less about cash flow and more about the write-off they got. Okay? So what this means is it means you got to look at 10 different things and try to package a deal that's attractive enough to wholesale. That makes sense? But there's some very, very basic fundamentals. Entry fee is what it seems like is the number one thing that a lot of buyers look at.
Yeah, for most buyers, they care about the entry fee, and they're usually trying to be, sub 10%. If you got a sub 10% deal, that's
You're going to kill it. Yeah. Assuming these other things are decent.
Yeah.
Yep. Now we're wholesaling entry fees in the 20%, but all these other things have to be dialed in, like really attractive if you're going to do a higher entry fee. Cash on cash so it's your total net after debt service, the return on your total net to the entry fee, because the entry fee is your total cash into the deal. So the question is for one of these buyers is, okay, if I put $50,000 in out of my net cash flow, what's my return on investment for that $50,000? So a lot of buyers really look at that cash on cash, which kind of goes along with net income. What's the net income?
What's a good cash on cash return?
10% or higher.
Yeah, we usually try to get in at 15 and assign at 10, because then we can kind of reverse engineer what our fee will be. And some properties, it just doesn't pencil like that, but they've got other attractive attributes like this one does.
Yep. But if you can hit a 15 or lower entry and a 10% cash on cash, you got a good deal. Like you're gonna have no problems wholesaling that for 20 grand. Okay, interest rate balloon is what? We talked about that. Balloon is if there's a balloon on a property, it's when the total loan is due. So Chris and I were talking about this a minute ago. We try really hard not to have balloons, because if you don't have a balloon and you've got a low interest rate, that makes it very attractive. Because let's say you have a 3-year balloon on your 2.5 rate. What's a buyer worried about? In 3 years, where a rate's gonna be. Whereas if you have a 2.5 rate and you have no balloon, man, that buyer's like, I got 27 more years on this loan at 2.5 fixed, I'm golden.
On those deals that we do get balloons, and a lot of times it's agents that will push the balloon. Sellers typically won't push the balloon. We'll try to get some sort of appraisal guarantee for their end buyer, stating that, in the event the property doesn't at least appraise for the original purchase price, we get an extension of, 3 years, just to protect them, on their refi or their sale.
Yep. Amortization is typically 30 years, right? But we've had some deals where the deal didn't pencil because of the cash flow. So what did we do to make it cash flow? Go to a 40-year loan or a 50-year loan. That makes your debt service lower, makes your cash flow higher. So you got some play here. That would only be if it was a seller finance, not a sub 2. Tax benefit is what's the depreciation write-off? Location, we'll look at okay, is this a class A, B, or C? What kind of location? The condition of the property, do they need to bring money in to get this thing rent ready or whatever they're doing with it? And then equity is probably the least of their concerns, as you'll see in a minute. But see how there's 10 different things that we want to look at. Now what's cool is if you have a calculator that just plugs these numbers in, you gather the data, you plug it in, and it spits out all the data for you, which is what we're going to do in a minute. Okay, so here's the steps to underwrite a creative finance deal. Basically, you're going to determine, okay, what's the best use of this property? Long-term, short-term, or wrap are your 3 main strategies. You could do a subtail. We just actually did a subtail. Mm-hmm. Subtail would be you take it over subject to and you list it and sell it to a retail buyer. And they come in and buy and they put the money down and all of it. That's kind of fun.
In that particular deal, it was, to most people, to investors, they wouldn't like it. They had a HELOC payment they were taking over, but to this buyer,
didn't cash flow.
Yeah, they were getting a 3% rate, and they were shopping at stuff at 7%. So this was a home run.
Yeah. So you can actually subtail these as well, which is kind of fun. Okay, so you're going to determine best use. Then you're going to calculate. Okay, well, what's my gross rents? From gross rents, you're going to factor in. Okay, well, what's my net operating income? So we're going to factor in some expenses, taxes, insurance, property management, maintenance, and vacancy are the top 5. We really don't do anything else other than those, maybe HOA if we know that. Debt service, that's going to be calculated out of either the structure we create with seller finance or the structure we take over with sub 2. That's going to tell us our net cash flow. Then that'll tell us our cash on cash. You figure out your wholesale fee. Then you'll know your total entry fee, put your marketing together, and then you're back to traditional wholesaling where you're now marketing this creative finance deal to your buyers. Okay? Now, who feels like that's kind of a lot to get your head around? It's really not. So when you guys go through it right now, you'll see that it's really not that complicated. And we're going to use this as a case study, and maybe we can even get to 2.
Yeah.
We spent too much time last session, and we only got to 1. But this is a property that Chris wholesaled recently in on the street was Alleyway. It was in Panama City, Florida for a $25,000 assignment. I mentioned earlier, check this out. The total acquisition was $434. It did not sell on the market at $390. So think about this, guys. Chris made a $25,000 assignment on a negative equity wholesale.
On the MLS.
Sitting that everybody was ignoring. Do you guys realize the low-hanging fruit right under your noses in your markets with this? It's a massive opportunity. This is 6 figures right under your nose in your market right now when you learn how to do this. But most of these deals are pretty close to value or overvalue that we wholesale. Okay, so this is our case study. We're going to break out into groups right now. Who has a laptop that can be okay, so we got 1, 2, 3. Great, we got a lot. So guys, raise your hand if you have a laptop. We're going to have you break out into groups, and you're actually going to take this information and plug it into this calculator. So you guys that have a laptop, get that QR code. It's a Google Sheet. Save it, like make a copy and save it on your computer so it'll let you edit it then, because this one won't. And then everybody else who's not with a laptop, get with someone that does. And you're going to actually go into this calculator right here, and you're going to input all the data from this right here. So I'm going to leave this screen up right now. So guys, we're going to go about 10 minutes, and then we're going to go through the numbers. So this is your information. This would be what you gather from a seller who's interested in a creative finance offer. Okay, oh, guys, don't override a green cell. That's a formula. If you type on a green cell, you'll screw up your formula. Undo that. It'll calculate for you what you need to know. So if you think you need to fill out something on a green cell, look further. You'll find where you put the information. Okay? Okay, everybody see this up here? All right, so let's start with the rent analysis, right? You put the $3,000 rent in. Everybody do that? And then look, here's all your operating expenses. This whole box here is for operating expenses. So we're going to factor in some standard things that most buy and hold investors want to see. 10% for management, 5% for maintenance. The insurance was $200, the taxes were $275, and the vacancy $150, and then HOA $88. Now notice here, if you factor in these expenses, then your net operating income is $1,836. Everybody get that? And that's 61%. So that means 39% in operating expenses, which is a little high. I mean, you typically you'll see between 30 and 40. So if you ever don't know, like, hey, what should I factor in for operating expenses? Typically 30 to 40% is going to cover most of what you would factor, right? So that means our net operating income is $1,836, but is that our cash flow? No, because what do we still have to factor in? Debt service. So now that we got this box, now let's go up here to our subject to purchase. So did everybody put in the loan of $347? Okay, then we've got our closing fees of $3, our assignment of $25,000, cash to seller of $30,000, our transaction coordinator for $1,000. That puts our total acquisition $435, right? So it's that plus all these fees. We have a solar loan, remember that? So everybody get $29,346 right here for the second position solar. Okay, so actually that's factored in as well to our total acquisition because you're taking that over. Yep. That's why this is so high. And then our total cash, our entry fee is $59. Everybody get that? Which is 14% of your total acquisition. Okay, so we're just inputting numbers. That's all we're doing here is we're gathering data, then we're inputting it into our calculator. Now, once you fill out this box, it's going to automatically input a lot of this. So it'll carry down the loan. Okay, so you should have 3.375, 30-year loan, 25 years remaining, which means your monthly PI is $1,534. Then we're going to look at our solar second loan. Okay, solar, let's at 29, it carried that down, right? Interest rate 259, 25 AM, 22 left. So that's a 132 loan for a total of 1667 in debt service. That 1667 gets carried over to here, and then we take our net operating income after we subtracted our expenses, that carries it down to here. We have 1836, everybody with me? 1668 in debt service for net cash flow of 168. Now, who's really excited about cash flow in 168? That's exciting, isn't it? Man, sign me up for this deal. So that's not so great, is it? Okay, but why did Chris wholesale this deal for $25,000 is what everybody should be asking right now. Okay, well, let's come back to that. Not only does the cash flow suck, but look at our cash on cash return. Who's excited about that? Because $168 a month on a 58, was it? On a 59 cash investment's not so great. So why did Chris wholesale this deal way overvalued for $25,000? Okay, so remember, it's not one thing. So this buyer overlooked cash flow and overlooked the cash on cash. What do you think they were attracted to about this deal? Okay, so check this out. Let's look at all the pluses. Who likes a 3.3 rate? Fixed, with no balloon. Who thinks that's attractive? Now, what justification will a buyer make with that? Over time, what's going to happen? I'm going to pay down my debt, property's going to appreciate, and what's going to happen to rents? So rents are go up. So this buyer's playing the long game. But that wasn't the most attractive thing. Chris, what did they really want this deal for?
Yeah, they wanted the depreciation. This guy was a self-employed dentist / real estate investor. But he also, the other component to this is he writes off all of his income a lot every year. So this property helps with that. But what typically happens is it makes it pretty difficult for him to buy property the conventional route because he shows, every year no income. And he had a big tax bill coming up, and this helped him.
Yeah. So the best month to sell creative deals is when? December. Yeah, you'll sell out like way overpriced stuff. So, okay, we like the interest rate. We like the no balloon. We also like 14% entry fees, pretty good. I mean, that hits our threshold of under 15%. That's pretty good. What else do you like about this? There's a tax benefit. It's 2021 built, mint condition, like great house. So that type of dentist, does a dentist want a D location property? No, they're going to buy only Class A, hands-off properties. So again, guys, it's not one thing. It's going to be how does everything play into itself as a factor. Okay, make sense? Yes. Yeah. So to wrap up, guys, I guess the biggest thing to take away is it's terms, not price, with creative. So if you can structure a great deal with great terms, and then you know how to identify who would be an ideal buyer for this property. Sometimes you don't know, and you got to put it out to the market. But if you can identify, okay, why is this attractive? What are the things that are attractive about it? Do I have enough things out of the 10 to offset maybe some of the other things? It's hard to get like all the stars to align, but if you can get 6 or 7 out of the 10 that are pretty attractive, then this is going to be a deal that the market's going to want. And these are, the other thing I wanted to say kind of in wrapping up here is there's ways that you can specifically target this type of seller. Like Chris mentioned earlier, someone who bought FHA or VA in the past 2 years, they don't have equity, now they're trying to sell. So a lot of these deals will go on market, we'll find that perfect avatar for sub 2. But we do a lot of deals where it's just the same sellers you're already marketing to, it's just now a different conversation when they say no to the low cash offer. So we anchor low, we're gathering data, we're doing discovery, and then we're saying, okay, this isn't going to fit a good solution for low cash. Let's offer creative now.
That's what this guy was. He came through PPC. He rejected our cash offer. He rejected Novation. So then we're like, all right, let's see if we can, make a sub 2 hybrid work. And he jumped for that.
Yep. So this is like, for everybody else, this is like a dead lead. And if you go back again to the original, that graph I showed, if you're a one-trick pony and you're playing in this box, I don't think you're going to survive as a wholesale operation in 2024 and beyond. I think you're going to really struggle because cost of marketing's gone up, competition's gone up. You're not the only person that seller's talking to, and you're trying to fit the low cash assignment into this box right here. A level 8, 9, 10 in motivation and high equity so they can take a 1, 2, 3 level cash offer. Whereas what we want to do is we want to be able to offer all the way up the motivation spectrum in solutions.
Okay, guys, big round of applause for Jerry and Chris.